Welcome back, and it's time for our Capital Report with Capital Beat OK's Pat McGuigan. Pat, we appreciate you coming in this morning. This week, CapitalBeatOK.com delved into the inner workings of the Oklahoma Education Association, the teachers union, essentially. Right. What did you find out?
Well, Stacy Martin, a researcher and reporter for Capital Beat OK, has been taking a close look at the OEA and got into finances and spending and salaries over the last couple of weeks. And her story showed that while state budgets have been tightening and even declining, and education spending has been nipped at the state level, that pay for the top staff at OEA has been increasing. In fact, payroll jumped $180,000 across 7 units at OEA over a 4-year period.
So, is there going to be any fallout from this, do you think?
I would think there might be. I mean, one 24-year veteran teacher, not a member of OEA, and this might be part of the reason this person's not a member of the OEA, person that teaches the early elementary grades in the suburbs told Stacy that they thought it was simply not fair. And I think when you compare it to some of the controversy that's raised about private sector compensation for executives, it's at least a fair discussion to look at the OEA's compensation. I'm not sure for the reason for all of this, other than anybody at the top end of the spectrum in an organization wants to make more money than the people down below. But the top staff at the OEA has free use of cars. They have, in one case, a hefty housing allowance, even though they own their home. There's a variety of compensation. There's a pretty good number of folks working there that make over $100,000 a year. Meanwhile, the average teacher salary in Oklahoma is $45,000 a year.
And so this is happening at a time when, you know, we're seeing budgets tighten and, well... Yeah,
I think they draw their income from the public, ultimately, through the dues that teachers pay. And it's a fair issue for analysis and discussion.
All right. Well, let's stay on this theme of education. And you wrote about public sector salaries and how a large portion of those making more than $100,000 in the public sector are in higher education. Yeah,
it was pretty interesting. This started out, just to be absolutely clear, it started out as a story, and is a story, about upper end compensation for public employees. What I found was that if you take the governor's salary, which is actually $147,000 a year, and use that as a threshold, there's a total of 877 state government employees making more than the governor. 825 of those are in higher education. That's why it became a higher ed story. Now then, you take the 100,000 figure, which is it's just a convenient threshold. Right. There's a total of 2,086, I want to make sure I get it right, 2,086 making over $100,000 a year in higher education. There's 519 others making 100,000 or more. So you can see that higher education is the bulk of the data that's available in terms of high-end compensation. Now, many of those in higher ed making the upper-end salaries are doctors. And of course, doctors are well compensated in our society and should be. So this is something I'm going to study a little more to just try to get as much information as possible on those pay scales, because they certainly initially raise an eyebrow.
Is there any indication that this is out of line with what's going on in other states? Or, I mean, is this just part of the price that we pay for having a good system of higher education?
Well, it's not out of line in terms of proportion. You know, Oklahoma's relatively a poor state, but all across the country this is an issue that you keep coming across high salaries for people in higher education. And you use the term good. That's an interesting term. OU and OSU certainly graduate the majority, eventually, 5 or 6 years sometimes it takes, but they do graduate the majority of the students who attend there. That's not true of all the smaller campuses. And so the number of schools might be looked at this coming session. I will also add that in addition to the number of campuses and sites and systems, that Jason Murphy is leading an interim study. Billy Roadley wrote about this for Capital Beat OK, that is specifically looking at the issue of transparency and openness and how much of information is withheld in higher ed compared to the rest of state government.
Something we can follow in this upcoming session.
Yes.
All right, Pat, thanks. You can read more about these and other topics at capitalbeatok.com. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.